So the basic point of what I'm going to talk about today is that although obviously both the thought, being the logos, and the action or the praxis are important, their relation to each other, in my opinion, is that of a brain and the limbs, respectively. They can't really be independent of each other, so to speak. And I'm of the view that even the most powerful, threatening, strongest body in the world is useless if there is no power to its brain. That is, its decision-making and its coordinative control. What this means on the plane of ideas is that if your basic ideas are muddled or not there at all, then you can't ignite the proper actions you need to take. The impulses have to be processed even in the most simple mind before, for example, you could swing a punch at somebody. Although there are some pubs in Wales where I've seen men who can swing punches without any real activity to the brain at all. I hear they have the same problem in Glasgow. But seriously, what I want to emphasize today is the importance of a truly infectious logos. A spark of an idea that can transmit an enormous power simply by communication to those in a position to act. And you could say then that this is a talk on kind of memology and transition, if you like. I call it infectious logos with the realization that I probably should have called it viral, because when a principle or a call to action or an idea hits its intended audience in exactly the right way, then the effect really is viral in how it spreads and how it gets things moving. And this does actually relate somewhat to my talk from last year, which some of you will remember, in which I said that we need to formulate an orthodoxy or a creed to build something solid in order to create a continuum of ideas. And following on from that, the reason we need to build a central orthodoxy, a vanguard in physical terms, is because of what I will tell you about today, the infectious logos, the electrical impulse that shoots from the brain and into the arm so that it can move after a decision has been made that it will. So let us begin by dissolving any populist delusions we may have. The kind of ideas I'm talking about seem to pretty much always originate from one individual. In a political or metaphysical sense, that individual, or perhaps a small group of individuals, tend to be patrician or elite in some way, or they've forged their own path to the elite. It may seem odd to once again draw from the recent Middle East to illustrate my point, like I did last year, but I think that this really is a good example of a very recent comparison, or an example of how an infectious logos can be used to spit in the face of a more powerful foe. In this case, the good old GAY, the global American empire. Just a few weeks before last year's event, the calamitous, haphazard, embarrassing, and wasteful American withdrawal, or we should say rout, from Kabul took place. In fact, we have some friends from Afghanistan here with us today, don't we? And I couldn't resist incorporating this into my speech last year as an example of how a relatively small, comparatively weak, technically inferior organization was able to prevail over a decadent global hegemon due to its totally rigid, unified creed, its orthodoxy, and its unfailing belief in a metaphysical system beyond this earth. I want to use the same example again, but this time as an example of the power of infectious logos. Your average fighter in an Islamic army, such as those that won in Kabul last year, is quite likely illiterate. This does not mean to say stupid necessarily, or without cunning, but he's probably not what we'd call a Quranic scholar, or a reader of esoteric texts, or war manuals, or fourth-way geopolitics, or anything like that. Aside from certain basic impulses, what's kept him and his comrades in that battle for 20 plus years? Against a foe, superior in every conceivable way, but one. That one being a certain kind of infectious logos. I will now take you to a sleepy, sweltering, dusty, quite middle-class neighborhood of Cairo sometime in the early 1950s. Cramped over a desk in one of the old, squat, flat-roofed townhouses is a sleepless, weak-chested, quiet, and often depressive man studying his holy book, the Quran. And all around him, and as they are all over the rest of the world, he feels that faith, truth, integrity, and good traditional societies are being slowly taken over by Western, mainly American, money and ways of life. So what could such a man do? He had no political power at that time. He had no allies in the government at that stage. He had no real money. He was too riddled with weakness and issues with his lungs to go leading any military campaigns. So instead, he consigned himself to the desk and made interpretations of the Quran, and he wrote political essays. And he set out, ultimately, to combine faith with a sense of duty and a need to rebuild the societies of old in the face of a creeping but militant westernization. He knew that ultimately no one would be able to defeat the empire with soft force or rhetoric alone, and the disparate anti-Western elements needed a unified credo. As the years went on, he continued to write. He gained a few disciples, spoke to a few imams and university professors, and eventually he ended up annoying the wrong man in the government, and they hanged him on trumped-up charges in 1966. But over time, his carefully crafted words found a new audience. They gave certain sects ideas on how to act and what to do and how to resist what was happening to them. The Logos became infectious. He breathed a new, unifying, and militant life into a religion and a cause that until then was uncertain of what it could or should do at the time. For better or for worse, he quite purposefully set in motion a mechanism that, in the word of one American military scholar, set us irrevocably on the path to September 11th and the wars in the Middle East.